I warn you, I have very strong views on this.
Okay.
My personal view is it's time for the mainstream media to get the fuck out of the way and let us do our job. Because I think what we're looking at here is the death of mainstream media. I think the whole idea of rivers of classified advertising flowing into institutional newspapers like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the big TV networks, the free-to-air TV networks, they bleat, they complain that they don't have the resources anymore to do investigative journalism. They're lying. They're just complacent, lazy, and they've completely lost their way. And I say that as somebody that's worked in the media in the highest levels of both newspapers and corporate television, commercial TV. I've been very privileged. I had a great career for 30 or 40 years, benefiting from the rivers of gold, the classified advertising that flowed through newspapers and television. That era is dead, and we've got to get over it. It's time to move on. The highest rating show in America right now that delivers news, whether we like it or not, and I don't necessarily, is Joe Rogan. The whole media industry is moving online. You can kill the New York Times, the Washington Post, for all I care. I don't give a fuck about them, forgive my vulgarity. They are the laziest, asinine newspapers. They deserve to fail. They have failed to cover this subject matter, and I have very strong views that they have essentially elected not to cover it because they don't want to jeopardize the sources that are feeding them. Because too much journalism these days is what I call access journalism. You have tame national security and defense correspondents who are spoon-fed stories about Ukraine or the Middle East by select people in the intelligence and defense community. That's not investigative journalism in my book. The whole point of media is to tweak the nose of power, to challenge authority. When the hell is the last time that the New York Times showed a spine? These were newspapers that rolled over and supinely accepted the explanations for COVID. That essentially, we were assured that the source of COVID was a market breakout. Now, we have differing accounts, obviously, inside the intelligence community, but it looks like the preponderance of evidence suggests it was the Wuhan lab. The media were being played. We allowed ourselves to be played. And I think if we don't discuss this in the media, and I know it's a really unpleasant truth, and nobody really wants to hear it. And I constantly say it here in Australia, and people hate me for saying it. But essentially, institutional media has become all about access journalism. You have a tame senior journalist who trots along to his friendly source in the intelligence community and the Defense Department. He gets fed a story that they want to promote. One of the big ones, by the way, that's being promoted at the moment is the so-called drones that have been seen not only over the United States, but over Australia and over Western Europe. And the explanation that's being put by the defense departments of all of these Five Eyes countries and other allied nations is that these are just drones from foreign adversaries, China or Russia. And we're meant to believe this in the absence of any evidence at all to support such a contention. In my day, when I was a young journalist, the editor would say, "Coulthart, the Defense Department's claiming these are drones. Go and find out what the hell's going on, because I don't believe it. It's bullshit." Now, that you were taught to be contrarian. Now we have these lapdog lickspittle shills in the mainstream media who do not do their job anymore. And I'm sorry, I don't think they're worth preserving. Let them die. I don't care about the New York Times, the Washington Post, because so much creditable journalism is now being done online by people who've walked away from that business. I just recently did a story about the JFK files, and I interviewed a very reputable former Washington Post journalist, and we both had a chuckle about how the Washington Post, and indeed my old TV networks in Australia, they wouldn't go near the story with a barge pole. But there is such an obvious story to be told about the release of the JFK files that's not being told. Why is the media assenting and allowing itself to be manipulated so? It bleats and complains and whinges all the time about not having money and about being pushed around. Grow up. I don't care anymore. It's irrelevant. I want mainstream media to die. It needs a stake through its heart.
It's very controversial, but I think there's something to it, actually. I just want to say that to the credit of the mainstream was actually the New York Times, an article in the New York Times that started this whole, I mean, the frenzy, the craze,
and if
the
you spoke
revelations
to
around
Leslie,
the UFO phenomenon in the last few years.
If you spoke to Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal, who are the reporters that broke that 2017 story and then did a follow-up story in 2020, they have tried and failed to get these stories up in that paper. I know because I introduced Leslie to Jake Barber. So Jake Barber is a direct first-hand witness to a covert, illegal, criminal US government private military aerospace non-human technology retrieval and reverse engineering program through which the American taxpayer are paying probably billions of dollars secretly, illegally. It hasn't been put to Congress, hasn't been given the proper congressional oversight. The Constitution states under Article 9, Section 1 of the Constitution, that it's absolutely fundamental that there be congressional oversight of all of these such programs. That has been declined. At what stage does the media go, you know what, this is a story? And it's funny, I laugh because I have journalists from major newspapers, major TV networks in the United States who tell me they acknowledge that this is the story, but they just can't get it up in their own institutions. And I say to them, resign, move on, go and tell the story online if you can't tell it there. Because this is a story that needs telling. It's the biggest story in human history. And in 20 or 30 years' time, when they come to write the history of this subject matter, the lamentable, egregious failure of the legacy media to actually show a spine and cover this story will be what people will remember. It failed, and it continues to fail.